Hello everyone, this is the last speech of the year, so yay. It's a lovely December, if I say so, December 7th, if I say so myself. I will be speaking today about capital punishment, or the death penalty for those who prefer the colloquial term. But before I do that, I have to introduce a friend of mine who hopefully should be coming in shortly to help me with my speech. Tony Dawson. Tony Dawson is a family friend of mine who helped me and my family around when I was younger. Went to high school with my mother and father, was a personal defense lawyer, had a wife and 3 kids, but unfortunately he had a drinking problem. And what ended up happening to him was one too many drinks before going on the road. Which actually kind of explains why he's late now that I think about it. He was executed in 2018. Hard times those were. All right, let me cut it. Tony Dawson is not a real person, but it does paint a picture for how the death penalty system can work. We have a tendency to think that everyone is a terrible person who is on death row, but hopefully with that little tidbit I was able to make you understand for a moment that everyone is a person. For a quick survey of the class, how many people in here think that the death penalty warrants, or that murder warrants the death penalty? Just by a quick show of hands. No one. Wow, okay. So, that is actually very surprising because according to the death penalty is unpopular everywhere but the Supreme Court, written by Matt Ford and published by Gale, 55% of Americans are pro-death penalty in the instance of murder. Now, this had changed because back in 1994, it was nearly 85%, which is a drastic cutoff. You guys seem to be an outlier. I thank you. I spent the last 2 weeks researching capital punishment in preparation for this speech. And now I bring you to my view. The death penalty should be abolished because it is an ineffective use of resources, and it would eliminate the biases that are ingrained into the system. Let's start by discussing how capital punishment is an ineffective use of resources. Capital punishment is a punishment that costs more time and money to keep around than not. According to Is Capital Punishment Ever Ethical, published by the Hastings Center and written by Richard Nicholson, it appears to be rare for an execution to take place for less than 5 years after a sentence in the U.S. I'd like you to keep that number in mind for a moment. According to Waiting to Die, Dying to Live, an account of the death row phenomenon from a legal viewpoint, written by Casey Broadford and published by the Interdisciplinary Journal of Human Rights Law, over the last 2 decades, prisoners were nearly doubled their time on death row. Now, I should clarify, this is only for the U.S. Other countries have different policies and different protocol when it comes to these matters. But the general trend was always an increase. Now, you might be wondering, Arturo, that's only the time. What does that tell us about money? Well, I'm sure it won't take you more than 2 seconds to realize, especially because of Anissa's speech. Keeping a prisoner around costs money. When you put someone in a box, to piggyback off of her speech, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. Prison cells don't come off trees, especially ones that are in solitary confinement. So, how much does it cost? Well, the answers vary. But according to a variety of articles, I can't just cite one here because there's many, from the Death Penalty Information Center, the cost of death row cases have varying prices, with some stating an added cost of $90,000 annually per prisoner, while others say a cost of nearly $3 million per death row inmate to a $1 million for a non-death row inmate. Keep that in mind. It costs nearly triple the amount of money to execute someone as it does to hold them in prison. That leads us to our second point. Not only is this system costly, but it is fueled by error. Capital punishment is I read the two lines at once. Capital punishment is a system that is ingrained to biases, which calls its ethicality into question. According to Capital Punishment, written by Michael Tykris and Carol Schwartz, and published by Gale, Professor David Baldus conducted a study on capital punishment in Georgia. Good old Georgia, the land of peaches. His results from 1973 to 1979 showed that someone was that someone was 11 times more likely to be executed if their victim was white. Yeesh, that is not good. America, what are you doing? Similar results were obtained in 2010. There was very little on what happened around this decade, but if the trend continued for nearly 30 years, 40 years, it's probably safe to assume it would continue today. Now, normally this would be where I'd go to point 3. However, I chose to do a counter-argument instead. The counter-argument would have you believe that the death penalty is fine for a variety of reasons that I will get to in a moment. However, I see some issues here with that personally. And I'd like to play a quick little game with the class. There's no right or wrong answer here. There's no points, so you just have to think on your own for these. Some people in the opposition claim that the death penalty scares off people from committing crimes like murder. I don't expect an answer from anyone. If anyone wants to be bold and share, they can. If not, so be it. How many people here have heard about a murder within the last week? For those on camera, that is nearly 5/7 of the class. So keep that in mind for the audience at home. Number 2. Some claim that capital punishment allows the government to assert authority over its citizens. Do you think that telling someone that you can kill them is a good way to keep someone in line? Again, for the people at home, the majority of people are shaking their heads no. And number 3, some people say that capital punishment helps the victims through closure or getting rid of individuals from society who are, how should I word this nicely, committing immoral acts. But falling back on that money issue and that time issue, if we spend those resources differently, say maybe to help the victims directly instead of taking out the problem, or maybe rehabilitating that problem, do you think that might go a little bit better than just trying to kill someone? This one seems a little more split among the class, but there are some head shakes. There are some people who seem very quiet on the matter, which is fine. There's, like I said in the beginning, there's no direct answers. I wish I could have just magically given an answer to this, but I can't. This is a very hard topic to discuss. So, to restate my point of view one more time, capital punishment should be abolished because it is an ineffective use of our resources, costing nearly triple what it should and keeping people locked away for an inhumane amount of time. It is a failure-prone system. Everyone says justice is blind, but from what I had there, it seems like justice... Actually, you know what? Maybe it is blind, because it seems to be swinging at all the wrong people. And with the counter-arguments there, although there's not necessarily something to cite there, there is a lot of questions to bring up regarding its moral standard and regarding the viewpoints that would be implied by the other side. So to go back to that Mr. Dawson example from the beginning, he is a fictitious person. He never existed. But it's important to note that there are a lot of people who don't consider the fact that people on death row are people too. They had a story. They had a life. And sure, they may have made mistakes, some greater than others. Some might have made no mistakes. Maybe their biggest mistake was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this shows that our view of criminals is horrendous. Animals. We view them as animals, even, you could say. Almost like they aren't worthy of attention. But will you do the same if someone you know is sentenced to death, or when you have to go watch them be put into the electric chair, or be shot by firing squad, or be lethally injected? Again, there's no easy answer to that. It all depends on you. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.